So now I'd like to turn it over to Professor Keith Ellis so that he can share just a few words. Oh, he's getting the stand. Vamos a darle un aplauso fuerte al profesor Ellis.
Well, I'm very happy to have been invited to participate in this panel. It's an area of my deep interest and I'd say my solidarity. And of course, my field is literature, and I like to bring literature into the picture when these things are happening. And I'm forced to remember the year 1824, because the year 1824 was the year of two final victories for Simón Bolívar. The victories in Peru, the victories of Junín and Ayacucho. And when those victories had been achieved, Simón Bolívar wrote to one of the leading poets in Spanish America at that time, José Joaquín de Olmedo, and suggested to Olmedo that he write about the triumphs that had been achieved, without mentioning Simón Bolívar, was the request. But Olmedo couldn't leave Simón Bolívar out of that poem that he managed to write. There's a poem, La Victoria de Junín, and in that poem, he really united two victories. The victory of Junín, that had taken place in August 1824, and the victory of Ayacucho, that took place on the 9th of December in that same year, 1824. And he, of course, extolled Simón Bolívar, he extolled Sucre, and at the same time, he brought into the picture as the voice of the poem, the narrator of the poem, the wise person who was centering all the information in the poem, Huayna Capac. Huayna Capac was the last of the Inca leaders to govern whole the empire of the Incas, Tawantinsuyu. And Huayna Capac, the presence of Huayna Capac was, of course, of great importance as the wise person. And it wasn't only Olmedo who was thinking of that pre-Columbian antecedent to the victories and the importance of the pre-Columbian people in the picture of the history of what we call Spanish America. The other leaders, for example, San Martin in Argentina. San Martin suggested, when they had achieved the liberation of Argentina, that, and they're looking around as Simón Bolívar himself was looking, as we could see in the Carta de Jamaica, in the letter of Jamaica, that he was searching around for the proper kind of government of the Americas. And San Martin suggested that they return to the way of governing of the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire was really, there are several books that are being written these days, or being written for the last 100 years or so, about the Inca Empire. And the titles usually go something like the Socialist Empire of the Incas. The word socialist and the idea of socialist was there in the Inca Empire. And these writers, these leaders, were thinking of the Incas as an example of what might happen for the future in Spanish America. There are not just the politicians and so on, but poets as well have gone back to that era for their inspiration. The Nicaraguan poet, the great poet priest, Ernesto Cardenal, known to you, has a poem called The Economy of Tawantinsuyo. The Economy of Tawantinsuyo. Reading poems like that, we understand more deeply than we usually do. How is it that the thinking of the people who founded ALBA has come about? The continuation of the thinking. Cardenal, for example, talks about the fact that the Incas had no use for money. They didn't use money in their everyday commerce. That there was no unemployment in Tawantinsuyo. That there was no thieving. That people really didn't need to put locks on their doors. That and the way that rudimentary society, in terms of the economy, was operated, that they just paid attention to the basic needs of the population. Enormous population of all of that area that covered virtually all of what we now know as South America. How is it that they did that? They organized their society based on, of course, an agricultural society. And the Incas had their harvests beginning, the first harvest was dedicated to the sun god. Secondly, the lands of people who were needy, the handicapped people, retired, fragile people, then those lands were looked after. Then the lands of the people in general, the working people. And finally, the lands of the Incas. The Incas, at last, they had that sense of responsibility to see that everything was done. They didn't know how to read or write. So that theory of the operation of their economy had to do with just looking at human beings, thinking of the needs of human beings, and seeing the responsibility of those who looked after them to be attentive to their needs. And so that example, that way of thinking, that example is what the people at the time of independence of Spanish America, when they're looking for a model, they thought about that. Simón Bolívar thought about that. San Martín thought about that. And that's why it is somewhat absurd. I remember hearing Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s when he was attacking the Cuban Revolution. He was saying that we're not going to allow socialism to come to this hemisphere. Of course, it was great ignorance, because it had been there from the beginning. And so this model, this way of thinking, this humanitarian way of thinking, because the Incas helped people up to the last moment. That is to say, they had things so organized that at the time of their deaths, they were given a little package of grain to take with them for the last journey. And so when ALBA, it is not, that current of thinking is something that has been continued through the great thinkers in Spanish America. It has been continued, and that's why we have someone like Jose Marti thinking of serving the people, someone like Hugo Chavez thinking of serving the people, making lives better for people, and not thinking so much of the cost. And so when in 2000 when ALBA was founded, it is not accidental that the two principal founders were people who were followed in the way of thinking of Simón Bolívar and in the way of thinking of Jose Marti. Because they thought in a way that was compatible with the way of thinking of that was really traditional, the deep roots of humanitarian thinking in Spanish America. The idea of people thinking about people and satisfying their needs. Out of ALBA, as was said, have come things like Operación Milagro. And this way of thinking, thinking about the economy, thinking about serving people, is illustrated, for example, in the way Operación Milagro came about. Do you know that the Cubans were helping people to read and write in Venezuela? In 2004, it was found, using this system, the best system in the world, to teach people to read and write, it was found that they couldn't, there's a certain group, a small group of people who couldn't benefit from the system. And so the Cubans wondered why, and they tested these people and found that they couldn't see well. And so the Cuban doctors reported the matter, reached the ears of Fidel Castro, and he said that these people couldn't see well, should be brought to Cuba for operations so that they could see better. Now, the matter of attending to eyesight was not a part of what one might call the agreement between Cuba and Venezuela. The agreement had to do with literacy, teaching people to read and write. But this way of thinking, the way of thinking to make sure that people's needs were looked after, not looking first at the cost, meant that the people had to have their eyesight attended to. And so that was done. And that was done, and it is spread into something. Also, it was seen that it had affected not just Venezuela, but affected countries all over the Caribbean and in other parts of Latin America. And the result is that more than 2 million people have now benefited from Operación Milagro. And so these, this way of looking at the economy, and the economists who, I listen to people who know about Bay Street and about Wall Street from time to time. I hear them assess Venezuela, I hear them assess Cuba, and I know that they're all wrong, because they don't understand that people come first, that people are to be served. And also, this way of doing things is uniting. ALBA is spreading. ALBA now has 11 members, but there are other countries in the Caribbean who are about ready to join ALBA, as in Jamaica in October of last year. And this problem that came about, Ebola in Africa, was alarming people in the Caribbean and all over the Caribbean. And the Cuban ambassador to Jamaica was going to a meeting of ALBA in Cuba to attend to this matter. And of course, Jamaica was wanting to, although not in ALBA, was wanting to be at that meeting. And he took with him a delegation from Jamaica. So with these good works, with this way of looking at things, with the way of looking at the economy, dating back to the way the Incas did things, we see that there is a strong, and I must say that it's spreading beyond the Caribbean. It's spreading, and it's alarming the United States. It's alarming Obama. For example, it's spreading to the old hemisphere, the old world, because I see that one of the things that is alarming the United States about Russia is that Russia seems to be thinking a lot along the lines of the way people in ALBA are thinking. They've raised the 86% of the people are now in the middle class in Russia. Poverty, levels of poverty are diminishing rapidly in Russia, despite all the efforts that are being made to what Obama calls devastate Russia. And so the spirit of the Americas, the spirit of ALBA is strong in the Americas. It's strong, and it is a factor in world politics now. It's achieving those dimensions. So thank you very much.